Chapter 1: The Secret That Changes Everything. Right now, as you're watching this video, you're sitting on top of the greatest mystery in human history. A secret so massive that it could change everything we think we know about ourselves, our past, and our future. What if I told you that the smartphone in your hand, the city you live in, even the language you're speaking, none of it might be humanity's first attempt at civilization? Picture this. It's a Tuesday morning 100,000 years ago, but instead of cavemen huddling around fires, imagine people who might have been as smart as us, maybe smarter, building something incredible. Then imagine that everything they created, every trace of their existence, vanished so completely that we're sitting here today thinking we're the first. This isn't science fiction. Real scientists are seriously considering this possibility, and the evidence, or lack thereof, is more compelling than you might think. But before we dive into this rabbit hole that might just blow your mind, make sure you're subscribed, because this journey is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about human history. Here's what really gets me thinking. We humans love to believe we're special. We look at our skyscrapers, our technology, our space programs, and we think, finally, humanity has arrived. But what if we haven't arrived at all? What if we're just back? Think about the last time you lost something important. Maybe your keys, your phone, or an important document. You searched everywhere, couldn't find it, and eventually concluded it must be gone forever. But then, months later, you found it in the most obvious place, and you realized you'd been looking right past it the whole time. That might be exactly what we're doing with an entire civilization. The story they teach us in school goes like this. Humans were primitive for hundreds of thousands of years. Then suddenly, around 10,000 years ago, we invented agriculture, cities appeared, writing was developed, and boom, civilization was born. It's a nice, clean story. Too clean, actually. But here's the first mind-bending fact. Modern humans, people with brains identical to ours, have been around for at least 300,000 years. That means for 290,000 years, we supposedly did nothing? We just sat around making the same stone tools, hunting the same animals, telling stories around fires. Does that sound like the human species, you know? I mean, look at what we've accomplished in just the last 200 years. We went from horse-drawn carriages to smartphones, from candlelight to nuclear power, from walking everywhere to landing on the moon, all in 2 centuries. So what were we doing for the other 299,800 years? Were our ancestors really that different from us? Here's where it gets controversial, and I want you to think about this carefully. What if they weren't different at all? What if somewhere in those vast stretches of prehistoric time, humans did exactly what humans do? They innovated, they built, they created something amazing. And then something happened. Something so catastrophic that it erased almost everything. Now, I know what you're thinking. But where's the evidence? Where are the ruins, the artifacts, the proof? That's exactly the right question to ask, and it's going to lead us down a path that's both terrifying and fascinating. Because the absence of evidence isn't always evidence of absence. Sometimes it's evidence of something much more profound. Consider this. If our civilization ended tomorrow, if every human disappeared right now, what would be left in 100,000 years? Our cities would crumble. Our metal would rust away. Our plastic would decompose. Our concrete would crack and turn to dust. Forests would reclaim our highways. Oceans would rise and fall. The very continents would shift. In just 100,000 years, which is nothing in geological terms, almost every trace of our existence would be gone. Future archaeologists might find a few stone foundations, maybe some pottery shards, and they'd probably conclude that we were a primitive society that barely understood agriculture. And that's terrifying, isn't it? That everything we've built, everything we've achieved, could vanish so completely that future beings might question whether we ever existed at all. But it's also liberating in a strange way, because if our traces could disappear so easily, then maybe, just maybe, we're not the first to walk this path. Maybe others stood where we stand now, looked up at the same stars, and dreamed the same dreams of reaching beyond this world. The question that's going to haunt us throughout this video is simple but profound. If we're not the first, if there really was an advanced civilization 100,000 years ago, what happened to them? And more importantly, what does that mean for us? But before we can answer those questions, we need to understand just how broken our current timeline really is. And trust me, once you see the cracks in the story we've been told, you'll never look at human history the same way again. So hit that like button if you're ready to question everything, because we're just getting started, and what comes next is going to change how you see your place in this ancient, mysterious world. Chapter 2: The Timeline That Doesn't Add Up. Let me tell you a story that will make you question everything you learned in history class. It's about a timeline that's so convenient, so perfectly packaged, that it should make us all suspicious. Because real life is never that neat, and real history is definitely never that simple. Open any textbook, and you'll see the same story repeated like gospel. Humans were primitive hunter-gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years. Then around 10,000 BCE, agriculture was invented. Cities appeared around 5,000 BCE. Writing emerged shortly after. The pyramids were built around 2,500 BCE. And voila, civilization was born, developing in a nice straight line to where we are today. But here's the first crack in that perfect story. It's not based on knowing everything that happened. It's based on finding the oldest stuff we can still dig up. And that's a massive difference that most people never consider. Think about it this way. Imagine you're an alien archaeologist visiting Earth 1,000 years from now, trying to understand human civilization. You might find the remains of stone churches and castles from medieval Europe, but you'd find almost nothing from our current digital age. No smartphones, no computers, no internet infrastructure. Would you conclude that humans in the 21st century were less advanced than humans in the 12th century? Of course not. But that's exactly the mistake we might be making about our own past. The brutal truth is this: the further back in time you go, the less evidence survives. Not because less was happening, but because time itself is the ultimate destroyer. And 100,000 years, that's long enough to erase almost everything we could ever hope to find. Let me share something that'll blow your mind. The oldest surviving wooden structure on Earth is only about 10,000 years old. Wood, one of humanity's most important building materials, simply doesn't last. Neither does leather, fabric, rope, or most metals. Even stone monuments like the pyramids, which seem eternal to us, are already showing serious signs of wear after just 4,500 years. But here's where it gets really controversial. What if our ancestors were smarter than we give them credit for? What if they deliberately used materials that would return to the Earth naturally, rather than leaving permanent scars on the landscape? Think about indigenous cultures around the world. Many of them create sophisticated structures from bamboo, wood, and plant fibers that are incredibly advanced, but leave almost no trace after a few decades. They're not primitive. They're sustainable in ways we're only beginning to understand. Now, imagine a civilization that took this approach to its logical conclusion. A society so advanced that they understood the importance of living in harmony with their environment. using biodegradable materials, renewable energy sources, and leaving minimal impact. From our modern perspective, obsessed with permanent monuments and industrial materials, we might completely miss the signs of their existence. And here's another crack in our timeline. We're incredibly biased about where we look for evidence. Most archaeological digs happen near existing historical sites or in places where we already suspect we'll find something. Nobody's spending millions of dollars to drill through miles of ocean floor on the off chance they might find evidence of a civilization that mainstream history says never existed. But think about where humans have always preferred to live: near water, on fertile plains, in coastal areas with good climate and abundant resources. Where are most of those areas today? Underwater. During the last ice age, sea levels were 400 feet lower than they are now. Entire continents worth of prime real estate, areas that would have been perfect for civilization, are now sitting at the bottom of the ocean, buried under centuries of sediment. We've explored less than 5% of our ocean floors. We've mapped more of the surface of Mars than we have of our own seabeds. If there really was an advanced civilization 100,000 years ago, and if they lived in the same kinds of places humans prefer today, then most of their world is now completely inaccessible to us. Here's something else that should make us pause. Every year, archaeologists make discoveries that push back the dates of human achievement. Complex cave art that's 40,000 years older than we thought possible. Stone tools that show sophisticated planning from 300,000 years ago. Evidence of ocean navigation and complex symbolic thinking dating back much further than our textbooks suggest. Each of these discoveries forces us to revise our timeline, to admit that humans were more capable earlier than we believed. But we only revise it a little bit at a time, always reluctant to make the bigger leap. What if we're not just wrong about the details? What if we're wrong about the entire story? And here's the most unsettling thought of all. Our current timeline isn't just about the past. It shapes how we see ourselves right now. We want to believe we're the pinnacle of human achievement, the first to truly master technology and science. It makes us feel special, chosen, destined for greatness. But what if we're not the pinnacle? What if we're just the latest attempt? What if the path we're walking has been walked before, and the destination we're heading toward has been reached already by people whose names we'll never know, and whose stories have been erased by time itself? Don't go anywhere, because next we're going to travel back to that mysterious world of 100,000 years ago, and what we find there might surprise you. Make sure to leave a comment. Do you think our timeline is missing something huge? Because after what I'm about to show you, you might never trust a history book again. Chapter 3: When Earth Was a Different World. Close your eyes and imagine stepping through a portal into the world of 100,000 years ago. What you'd see would be both achingly familiar and utterly alien. A planet that's recognizably Earth, but an Earth transformed in ways that would take your breath away. The first thing you'd notice is the cold. We're in the middle of the last ice age, and massive glaciers stretch across continents like frozen oceans. But don't imagine a frozen wasteland. This is a world of incredible diversity and strange beauty. Where New York City stands today, ice sheets tower thousands of feet high. Where the English Channel separates Britain from France, there's dry land, a vast plain where people could walk from one continent to another. But here's what would really shock you. This different Earth had enormous areas of prime real estate that simply don't exist anymore. With so much water locked up in ice, the oceans were 400 feet lower. Entire continents of land, areas the size of Australia, were exposed and habitable. These weren't frozen wastelands. Many were temperate, fertile regions with rivers, forests, and grasslands. Picture the Mediterranean basin, mostly dry land with scattered lakes. Imagine walking across a land bridge from Asia to Alaska, through valleys and plains that are now deep underwater. Think about massive river systems flowing across what is now the ocean floor, creating oases of life in this transformed world. And in this alien Earth, there were people, not the grunting cavemen of popular imagination, but anatomically modern humans with brains identical to ours. They had the same capacity for language, art, planning, and innovation that we do. They looked at the same stars we see, felt the same curiosity about their world, and faced the same fundamental challenges of survival and meaning that we face today. But here's where it gets really interesting. These people lived in a world of untapped resources that we can barely imagine. No mountains had been stripped for metals. No forests had been clear-cut. No rivers had been polluted. The earth was pristine, offering materials and opportunities that we've long since exhausted. Imagine obsidian deposits that hadn't been touched, creating natural glass sharper than the best surgical steel. Picture vast forests of ancient hardwoods that had grown for millennia, offering building materials stronger and more durable than anything we use today. Think about mineral deposits lying close to the surface, easily accessible without the massive mining operations we require. These weren't people struggling to survive in a hostile world. They were highly intelligent beings living on a planet that was, in many ways, far richer and more generous than the Earth we know today. And here's something that should make us pause. We know these people were capable of incredible things. They created art that still moves us today, sophisticated tools that show deep understanding of physics and engineering, and they developed complex social systems that allowed them to thrive in diverse environments across the globe. So why do we assume they stayed primitive for hundreds of thousands of years? Why do we imagine that these brilliant, curious, innovative people, our direct ancestors, never tried to build something bigger, something more permanent, something that would outlast their own brief lives? The answer might be simpler than we think. Maybe they did try. Maybe they succeeded. Maybe in some of those vast, fertile plains that are now underwater, or in those rich valleys that are now buried under glacial sediment, something remarkable was built. Consider this. If a group of these intelligent, resourceful people had settled in one of those prime locations, let's say a large river valley in what's now the middle of the Pacific Ocean, they would have had everything they needed: fresh water, fertile soil, abundant wildlife, rich mineral deposits, and a stable climate zone protected from the worst effects of the Ice Age. Over thousands of years, with the same inventiveness that characterizes our species, what might they have created? Not necessarily cities of stone and steel like ours, but something suited to their world and their values. Maybe structures of advanced organic composites that were stronger than stone, but returned to the earth when abandoned. Maybe energy systems based on geothermal or biological processes that left no permanent scars. Maybe transportation networks using the vast river systems and coastlines of their transformed world. And if such a civilization had existed, where would it be now? Under 400 feet of ocean water, buried beneath millennia of sediment, in places we've never looked and might never be able to explore. The people of 100,000 years ago weren't living in our world. They were living in a completely different planet, with different opportunities, different challenges, and different solutions. We judge them by what we would do in our current environment, but that might be like judging a deep-sea creature by how well it performs on dry land. What's coming next will challenge everything you think you know about the power of time itself. Because even if these ancient people did build something extraordinary, time had other plans. And those plans were more thorough and more devastating than any catastrophe we can imagine. If you're starting to see history differently, smash that like button and get ready to discover why time itself might be humanity's greatest enemy. Chapter 4: The Great Erasure: How Time Destroys Civilizations. Time is not your friend. In fact, time might be the most ruthless destroyer that has ever existed, and it's been working on erasing human achievements for as long as humans have been achieving anything. What I'm about to show you will fundamentally change how you think about permanence, legacy, and the fragility of everything we consider solid and enduring. Let me start with a thought experiment that should terrify every human on Earth. Imagine that right now, at this very moment, our civilization ends. Not from war, not from climate change, not from any dramatic catastrophe. Just imagine that somehow every human simply vanishes. The cities remain standing, the infrastructure stays intact, but there's no one left to maintain anything. What happens next is a horror story written by time itself. In the first year, without human maintenance, plants begin reclaiming our cities. Weeds crack through sidewalks, vines climb buildings, and forests start their slow march back through our neighborhoods. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time. After 10 years, most wooden structures have begun to rot. Bridges start to fail as steel cables rust and concrete develops cracks. The roofs of houses collapse under the weight of accumulated debris and growing vegetation. After 100 years, most of our cities would be unrecognizable. Skyscrapers would become towering ruins choked with vegetation. Our highways would be broken ribbons of crumbling asphalt, disappearing into forests. After 1,000 years, almost all of our buildings would be gone. Only the most massive stone structures, things like the pyramids or Mount Rushmore, would still be recognizable, and even they would be heavily weathered and partially collapsed. But we're not talking about 1,000 years. We're talking about 100,000 years. That's 100 times longer than the entire span from ancient Rome to today. It's long enough for continents to noticeably change shape, for rivers to completely alter their courses, for coastlines to move hundreds of miles. In 100,000 years, the forces that reshape our planet would erase almost everything. And I mean everything. Let me paint you a picture of what Earth's recycling system can do. First, there's erosion, the slow, patient grinding that never stops. Every rainstorm washes away tiny particles of rock and soil. Every windstorm carries dust and debris. Every freeze-thaw cycle cracks stone a little more. It seems gentle, almost imperceptible, but over geological time, erosion can level mountains. If it can level mountains, what chance do our cities have? Then there's the more dramatic reshaping. Earthquakes crack foundations and topple structures. Volcanoes bury entire regions under ash and lava. Floods carve new channels and wash away everything in their path. Forest fires clear vast areas, making room for new growth that will hide whatever remains. But the real destroyer is plate tectonics, the slow dance of continents that never stops. The ground beneath your feet is moving right now, just too slowly for you to notice. But over 100,000 years, that movement adds up. Land rises and falls. Ocean floors are recycled into the Earth's mantle. Entire regions can be pushed up into mountain ranges or dragged down beneath the sea. Here's the mind-bending part. In some places on Earth, the ground you could stand on today simply didn't exist 100,000 years ago. And in other places, ground that existed then is now miles beneath the surface, or has been completely destroyed and recycled by geological processes. Even our most durable creations are shockingly temporary on this timescale. Take the pyramids of Egypt, monuments we consider eternal. They're already crumbling after just 4,500 years, and they're in one of the driest, most geologically stable places on Earth. In a wet, seismically active region, they would have been ruins within a few thousand years. Now, imagine trying to find evidence of a civilization that used different materials than we do. What if they built with advanced organic composites, materials stronger than steel but designed to biodegrade? What if they used living architecture, growing buildings from specially modified trees or coral-like organisms? What if their technology was biological rather than mechanical? From their perspective, this might have been the height of advanced thinking, creating a sustainable civilization that lived in harmony with natural cycles. But from our perspective, trying to find evidence of their existence, it would be like they never existed at all. And here's something that should make every archaeologist wake up in a cold sweat. We're probably walking past evidence of ancient civilizations all the time without recognizing it. That oddly straight ridge in the landscape could be the remains of an ancient wall. That unusually regular pattern in the rock layers might be the compressed remains of ancient structures. Those strange chemical signatures in the soil could be the only trace left of an industrial process we don't understand. But here's the most chilling thought of all. The same forces that could erase a civilization from 100,000 years ago are working on us right now. Every day, wind and rain and geological processes are slowly, patiently dismantling everything we've built. We maintain our infrastructure constantly, fighting a never-ending battle against entropy and decay. What happens when we lose that battle? What happens when our civilization reaches its limits? When we can no longer maintain the complex systems that keep our world running? Will future archaeologists, digging through the ruins of our time, find enough evidence to understand what we achieved? Or will they conclude, like we do about our distant ancestors, that the people of the early 21st century were primitive beings who barely understood agriculture? The Great Erasure isn't coming. It's already here, working on our world every second of every day. The only question is whether we'll be able to leave behind evidence that survives its relentless work. Coming up next, we'll meet the scientists who dared to ask the question that everyone else was afraid to consider. And their answer might change everything we think we know about our planet's hidden history. Chapter 5: The Scientists Who Dared to Ask. In 2018, something extraordinary happened in the world of science. Two respected researchers, not fringe theorists or conspiracy enthusiasts, but mainstream scientists with impeccable credentials, published a paper that asked a question so radical it should have ended their careers. Instead, it started a revolution in how we think about deep time and lost civilizations. Dr. Gavin Schmidt, a climate scientist at NASA's Goddard Institute, and Dr. Adam Frank, an astrophysicist at the University of Rochester, did something that most scientists avoid like the plague. They took a science fiction scenario seriously. They asked, if an industrial civilization had existed on Earth millions of years before humans, how would we detect it today? They called it the Silurian hypothesis, after a race of intelligent reptiles from the British science fiction series Doctor Who. The name was playful, but the science was deadly serious. And what they discovered should keep every archaeologist and historian awake at night. Their conclusion was both simple and earth-shattering. We probably wouldn't be able to detect it. Not because the evidence doesn't exist, but because we're looking for the wrong things in the wrong places. Think about what Schmidt and Frank realized. Physical artifacts, buildings, machines, even bones, have almost no chance of surviving millions of years. But industrial civilizations leave other traces, subtler fingerprints embedded in the geological record itself. Changes to atmospheric chemistry, unusual isotopic signatures, spikes in certain elements or chemicals that don't occur naturally. Our own civilization is creating these signatures right now. We're pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere at unprecedented rates. We're creating synthetic chemicals that will persist for hundreds of thousands of years. We're even changing the isotopic composition of carbon in the atmosphere through our use of fossil fuels. In 50 million years, when all our cities have crumbled to dust and all our artifacts have long since vanished, these chemical signatures might still be detectable in deep rock layers. A thin line of evidence that something unusual happened to Earth's atmosphere in the early 21st century. Schmidt and Frank's breakthrough was asking, what if similar signatures already exist in much older rocks? What if we've been walking past evidence of ancient industrial activity without recognizing it because we weren't looking for it? But here's where their research gets really controversial. They focused on timescales of millions of years, but their methods could apply to much shorter periods too. A civilization from 100,000 years ago might not have left behind pyramids or pottery, but it could have left behind chemical fingerprints, isotopic anomalies, or geological signatures that we simply haven't learned to recognize yet. The more I dove into their research, the more I realized how limited our current approach to archaeology really is. We're like detectives trying to solve a crime by only looking for fingerprints, when we should also be checking for DNA, chemical traces, and digital footprints. And then I discovered something even more unsettling. Schmidt and Frank weren't the first scientists to consider these possibilities. They were just the first brave enough to publish their thoughts in a major journal. Other researchers had been quietly wondering about similar questions for years, but the topic was considered too speculative, too risky for serious academic careers. Dr. Jan Zalasiewicz, a geologist at the University of Leicester, has spent years studying how human activity is changing Earth's geological record. His research shows that our current civilization will leave behind a distinct techno-fossil layer, a thin but unmistakable signature of plastic, concrete, and metal that will be detectable millions of years from now. But Zalasiewicz has also noted something intriguing. Similar techniques could potentially detect evidence of much older technological activity if we knew what to look for and where to search. The problem, as these scientists quickly discovered, is that looking for evidence of ancient industrial activity requires a completely different approach than traditional archaeology. Instead of digging for artifacts, you need to analyze chemical compositions of ancient rocks and sediments. Instead of looking for structures, you need to search for anomalies in isotopic ratios and unusual mineral deposits. It's expensive, technically challenging, and most importantly, it requires convincing funding agencies to support research into something that most people believe never existed. But here's what really excites me about this research. It's not just about the past. Understanding how civilizations might leave traces in the geological record could help us better understand our own impact on the planet. It could inform how we think about sustainability and long-term planning. And it opens up an entirely new way of searching for evidence of intelligence, not just on Earth, but on other planets too. If we ever explore the geology of Mars or Venus in detail, the techniques developed by Schmidt and Frank could help us detect whether those planets ever hosted their own industrial civilizations. The scientists who dared to ask the forbidden question didn't just challenge our assumptions about the past, they gave us new tools for exploring it. And those tools are already revealing surprises that no one expected. Next, we're going underground to explore the hidden worlds where evidence of ancient civilizations might still be waiting, perfectly preserved, just beyond our reach. Chapter 6: Hidden Worlds Beneath Our Feet. Beneath your feet right now lies a hidden universe, a vast network of caves, chambers, and underground spaces that could be hiding the greatest archaeological treasures in human history. While we've been searching the surface of our planet for traces of ancient civilizations, the most important evidence might be waiting in the dark, protected spaces where time moves differently and preservation works miracles. Let me tell you about the Postojna cave system in Slovenia. For centuries, people walked past its entrance without realizing that beneath their feet lay 24 kilometers of underground passages containing some of the most perfectly preserved environments on Earth. When explorers finally ventured inside, they found formations, artifacts, and even living creatures that had been unchanged for thousands of years. This isn't unique. Caves around the world act like natural museums, creating environments so stable that they can preserve organic materials for tens of thousands of years. The famous cave paintings at Lascaux in France are 17,000 years old and still vibrant. Wooden artifacts found in dry caves have been carbon dated to 40,000 years old. Human remains discovered in cave systems have preserved DNA that scientists can still analyze after 50,000 years. But here's what really gets my imagination racing. We've explored less than 1% of the world's cave systems. In the United States alone, new caves are discovered every month, and some of them contain chambers larger than cathedral naves, preserved ecosystems that have been isolated for millions of years, and conditions so stable that they could maintain artifacts indefinitely. What if an advanced civilization from 100,000 years ago understood this? What if they deliberately chose to preserve their most important knowledge, their most precious artifacts, their greatest achievements in these underground sanctuaries? Think about it from their perspective. On the surface, they could see that everything they built was temporary. Structures weathered away, metals corroded, organic materials rotted. But underground, in the right conditions, things could last forever. A wise civilization might have created underground archives, storage chambers, or even entire cities designed to outlast whatever catastrophes might befall the surface world. And we're not just talking about natural caves. Advanced engineering could have created underground complexes that we're only now beginning to discover. The underground city of Derinkuyu in Turkey, which housed 20,000 people and extends 18 stories underground, was only discovered in 1963 when a man renovating his house broke through a basement wall. It had been hidden for over 1,000 years, and it was built with Bronze Age technology. Imagine what could be hidden using more advanced techniques, buried deeper, sealed more carefully, waiting in chambers that we haven't even begun to look for. But the most intriguing possibility lies in places we can't easily reach. The deep underground spaces beneath ice sheets, under deserts, and in geologically stable regions that have remained unchanged for hundreds of thousands of years. In Antarctica, ground-penetrating radar has revealed vast underground cavities, spaces large enough to contain entire cities, sealed beneath ice that has been solid for 400,000 years. These chambers exist in a state of perfect preservation, where temperatures never change and nothing decays. If ancient people had access to these spaces before the ice advanced, Anything they left behind would be perfectly preserved, waiting like a time capsule for the day we develop the technology to reach it. Similarly, beneath the Sahara Desert, satellite imaging and seismic surveys have detected enormous underground structures, not natural formations, but geometric patterns that suggest human construction on a massive scale. These structures lie beneath hundreds of feet of sand that has accumulated over millennia in one of the driest, most preserving environments on Earth. The technology exists today to explore these hidden worlds, but it requires enormous resources and political will. Deep drilling operations can cost millions of dollars. Underground exploration robots are still in early development, and most importantly, there's little incentive to fund such expeditions when mainstream archaeology doesn't expect to find anything significant. But here's something that should make us reconsider. Every time we do explore these hidden spaces, we find surprises. The recent discovery of vast chambers within the Great Pyramid of Giza, revealed using cosmic ray imaging, showed us that even our most studied monuments still hold secrets. If we're still discovering hidden spaces in structures we've been exploring for centuries, imagine what we might find in places we've never looked at all. And there's another possibility that's both exciting and terrifying. What if some of these underground spaces aren't empty? What if they contain not just artifacts, but preserved environments, ecosystems, or even biological materials from ancient civilizations? Recent discoveries in cave systems have revealed bacteria and other microorganisms that have been isolated for millions of years, evolving in complete isolation from the surface world. What if similar preservation conditions have maintained more complex biological evidence from advanced ancient societies? The underground world represents our best hope for finding definitive proof of ancient civilizations, but it also represents our biggest challenge. These hidden spaces are often in the most remote, dangerous, and inaccessible places on Earth. They require specialized equipment, enormous funding, and years of planning to explore safely. But perhaps most importantly, they require us to admit that we might have been looking in all the wrong places. While we've been digging up the surface layers of recent history, the real treasures of deep time might be waiting in the darkness beneath our feet, perfectly preserved and patiently waiting for the day we're brave enough to go looking for them. Next, we're going to explore an even more dramatic possibility: entire civilizations that might be hiding beneath the waves, drowned by rising seas and buried under centuries of marine sediment. Chapter 7: The Drowned Civilizations. Imagine the most shocking archaeological discovery in human history: an intact city with buildings, streets, and artifacts sitting on the ocean floor in perfect preservation. Now imagine that this city is 100,000 years old, built during the Ice Age, when sea levels were 400 feet lower and vast coastal plains existed where we now see only open ocean. This isn't fantasy. The underwater world contains more unexplored territory than the surface of Mars, and hidden beneath those waves might be the answer to humanity's greatest mystery. During the last Ice Age, the Earth looked dramatically different. With massive amounts of water locked up in continental glaciers, sea levels dropped by more than 120 meters. That's 400 feet lower than today. This exposed enormous areas of what is now the ocean floor, creating coastal plains and river valleys that were prime real estate for any intelligent species. Think about where humans have always chosen to build their civilizations: river deltas, coastal plains, areas with access to fresh water and marine resources. Today, these are exactly the kinds of environments we find most desirable: Miami, New York, London, Tokyo, all built on what would have been coastal plains during the Ice Age. Now here's the staggering part. When the Ice Age ended and the glaciers melted, rising seas flooded these areas so rapidly that anything built there would have been submerged with little warning. Entire landscapes, areas larger than continents, disappeared beneath the waves in just a few thousand years. We're talking about more than 20 million square kilometers of former land surface that's now underwater. That's equivalent to losing 2 entire continents, including all the rivers, valleys, coastal plains, and potentially habitable areas they contained. And we've barely explored any of it. We've mapped less than 20% of the ocean floor in any detail, and we've physically explored less than 5%. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the bottom of our own oceans. But when we do explore these drowned lands, we keep finding surprises. Underwater archaeologists have discovered 9,000-year-old settlements off the coast of Israel, complete with stone structures and human artifacts. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument, a massive stone structure that some believe is artificial, sits submerged in what would have been dry land during the Ice Age. These discoveries are from the relatively recent past, but they prove an important point. The seafloor isn't empty. It contains the remnants of landscapes where humans once lived. And if humans were building settlements 9,000 years ago in areas that are now underwater, what might we find from 100,000 years ago? The preservation conditions underwater can be remarkable. In the absence of oxygen, organic materials can survive for incredible periods. Shipwrecks from thousands of years ago have been found with wooden hulls, fabric sails, and even food supplies still intact. The cold, dark, oxygen-free environment of deep ocean sediments creates natural time capsules. But here's what really excites me. The technology to explore these drowned worlds is finally catching up to our curiosity. Advanced sonar systems can now map underwater landscapes in incredible detail. Underwater robots can explore areas too dangerous for human divers. Ground-penetrating sonar can see through layers of sediment to reveal buried structures. And what we're beginning to see is astonishing. Underwater surveys have revealed geometric patterns on the sea floor that don't match any known natural formation. Straight lines, right angles, and regular spacing that suggest artificial construction. Most of these anomalies are dismissed as natural phenomena because the idea of finding cities on the ocean floor still seems too far-fetched to most archaeologists. But consider this. If an advanced civilization had existed during the Ice Age, they would naturally have built their cities in the most favorable locations, near coastlines, in river deltas, on fertile plains. Today, all of those locations are underwater, buried under centuries of marine sediment. The evidence could be down there right now, waiting in the darkness. Entire cities, preserved in the cold, oxygen-free environment of the deep sea floor. Artifacts, structures, maybe even organic remains that could rewrite human history. But it's locked away in one of the most inaccessible environments on Earth. The costs of deep-sea archaeology are enormous. A single expedition can cost millions of dollars and require months of planning. The equipment is specialized and expensive. The legal issues around underwater exploration are complex. And most importantly, there's little funding available for searching for civilizations that most people believe never existed. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Every year, we discover new underwater sites that push back the dates of human achievement. Each discovery forces us to revise our timeline, to admit that our ancestors were more capable and more widespread than we previously believed. What if we're not just wrong about the timeline, What if we're wrong about the scope? What if the most important archaeological sites in human history are sitting right now on the ocean floor, perfectly preserved, waiting for the day we develop the courage and technology to go looking for them? Coming up next, we'll explore the possibility that our ancestors left us clues about these lost civilizations, not in books or carvings, but in something even more enduring: the stories they told. Chapter 8: Myths that might be memories. What if the bedtime stories our ancestors told around campfires weren't just entertainment? What if the myths and legends that have survived for thousands of years aren't fantasy at all, but the last fading memories of something real, something so extraordinary that it could only survive as legend? Every culture on Earth has stories about a time before time, about great civilizations that rose and fell, about floods that destroyed entire worlds, about people who possessed knowledge and power that seems magical to us today. We've always assumed these were just stories, invented to explain natural phenomena or teach moral lessons. But what if we've been wrong? Let me tell you about a discovery that changed how I think about ancient stories. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples have oral traditions describing coastal lands that were once dry but were swallowed by the ocean. For decades, anthropologists assumed these were mythical tales. But when geologists studied the areas described in these stories, they found something remarkable. The Aboriginal descriptions accurately matched the actual geography of land that was flooded by rising seas more than 7,000 years ago. These people had preserved accurate geographical information for over 200 generations through nothing but storytelling. They had maintained detailed maps of landscapes that no living person had ever seen, passed down through countless retellings around countless fires. If oral tradition can preserve accurate information for 7,000 years, what else might be hidden in the myths of the world? Consider the story of Atlantis, written down by Plato 2,400 years ago. He described it as a great island civilization with advanced knowledge, which was destroyed in a single day and night by floods and earthquakes. Most historians see this as pure allegory, but the details are surprisingly specific. A circular city with alternating rings of water and land, advanced metallurgy, naval technology, and agricultural systems. But Atlantis isn't unique. Similar stories appear in cultures that had no contact with each other. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh describes a great flood that destroyed the world. Hindu texts speak of vast civilizations destroyed by catastrophe. Native American traditions tell of times when the earth was reshaped and entire peoples vanished. Norse mythology describes cycles of creation and destruction, worlds that rise and fall in endless repetition. The specific details vary, but the themes are remarkably consistent. Advanced peoples with great knowledge, catastrophic destruction involving floods, earthquakes, or climate change, survivors who must rebuild from nothing, and always, the sense that this has happened before. What if these aren't separate stories invented by different cultures? What if they're all fragmented memories of the same events, passed down through thousands of years of retelling, changing in details, but preserving the essential truth? There's something else that makes these stories particularly intriguing. They often include technical details that shouldn't have been known to the people who first told them. Ancient flood myths frequently describe rising sea levels, changing coastlines, and climate shifts that match what we now know about the end of the Ice Age. How could Bronze Age peoples have known about global sea level changes unless they were describing something that was passed down from people who actually experienced it? And then there are the stories that seem to describe technology. Sumerian texts mention flying machines and weapons of the gods, with descriptions that sound remarkably like aircraft and advanced weaponry. Sanskrit epics describe vimanas, flying vehicles with precise technical specifications for their construction and operation. These could be fantasy, of course, but the level of detail is unusual for purely fictional accounts. Consider the Mayan creation myth, which describes previous worlds destroyed by flood, fire, and other catastrophes, with humanity being recreated each time. The Maya were sophisticated astronomers and mathematicians who understood geological timescales that wouldn't be rediscovered by European science for over 1,000 years. Were they really just inventing stories about cyclical destruction, or were they preserving knowledge about something that had actually happened? Here's what really gets my attention. These myths aren't random. They cluster around specific themes and time periods. Many describe catastrophic events that match what we know about the end of the last ice age: rapid climate change, rising seas, mass extinctions. It's as if cultures around the world were all trying to preserve the memory of the same traumatic period in human history. But if these stories do preserve memories of real events, they suggest something profound. Somewhere in humanity's past, there were peoples with knowledge and capabilities that were lost, destroyed by catastrophes so severe that only fragmentary memories survived in the form of legends. The myths might be telling us that we're not the first to reach for greatness, not the first to dream of mastering our environment, not the first to believe we had conquered the forces of nature. They might be warning us that such confidence can be dangerous, that civilizations can rise high and fall hard, and that sometimes the only thing that survives is the story. Next, we're going to examine the physical evidence, the artifacts and anomalies that might be direct proof that our myths are memories of something real. Chapter 9. The artifacts that shouldn't exist. In a coal mine in Illinois, workers made an impossible discovery. Embedded deep within a lump of coal that had formed millions of years ago, they found a metal pot. Not lying near the coal, not dropped into the mine, physically embedded within the coal itself, as if it had been there when the coal was formed. According to everything we know about geology and human history, this should be impossible. But the pot exists. It was photographed, documented, and examined. And it's just one of dozens of artifacts that seem to violate our understanding of when intelligent life developed the ability to create sophisticated objects. These are called out-of-place artifacts, objects found in contexts where they shouldn't exist according to our current timeline of human development. Most have conventional explanations when studied carefully, but some continue to puzzle scientists and archaeologists decades after their discovery. Let me tell you about the Antikythera mechanism, found in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece in 1900. For decades, it was dismissed as a piece of corroded metal, unimportant debris from an ancient ship. Then, in the 1970s, scientists used X-ray technology to look inside it and discovered something that shocked the archaeological world. The Antikythera mechanism is a sophisticated geared computer built around 100 BCE, capable of predicting the positions of the sun, moon, and planets with remarkable accuracy. It contains gear trains, differential gears, and mathematical calculations that shouldn't have been possible with ancient technology. The level of precision and sophistication wasn't seen again until astronomical clocks were built over 1,000 years later. This single artifact forced historians to completely revise their understanding of ancient Greek technology. If they could build mechanical computers 2,000 years ago, what else might they have been capable of? And if we were so wrong about technology from just 2,000 years ago, how wrong might we be about technology from 100,000 years ago? But the Antikythera mechanism is from recorded history. The really controversial artifacts are much older. In South African mines, workers have found hundreds of mysterious metal spheres embedded in rock layers that are supposedly 2.8 billion years old. These spheres have unusual properties. They're perfectly balanced. They have internal structures that don't match any known natural process, and they're made of metal alloys that don't occur naturally. Most geologists believe these are natural formations called concretions, created by chemical processes in ancient rocks. But some of the spheres have features that are difficult to explain naturally: parallel grooves that run around their circumference, internal chambers with specific structures, and compositions that seem deliberately engineered. Then there's the London hammer, found embedded in rock in Texas in 1936. The hammer appears to be a standard blacksmith's tool, but it was discovered in limestone that's supposedly 140 million years old. The metal composition is unusual, nearly pure iron with trace elements that don't match any known natural or industrial process from the modern era. Skeptics point out that mineral deposits can form around modern objects under certain conditions, making them appear much older than they actually are. But supporters note that the limestone formation shows no signs of being disturbed or altered, and the hammer's preservation is unlike anything seen in modern objects embedded in rock. What makes these artifacts particularly intriguing is not just their age, but their sophistication. If humans or human-like beings were creating metal tools, complex machinery, or precisely engineered objects hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, it would completely revolutionize our understanding of intelligence on Earth. But here's the problem with out-of-place artifacts. Proving their authenticity is incredibly difficult. Contamination is always possible. Objects can be moved by geological processes, mixed into older layers by flooding or tectonic activity, or even deliberately placed by hoaxers. Without rigorous scientific documentation from the moment of discovery, it's almost impossible to definitively prove that an artifact is as old as its geological context suggests. Even more challenging is the interpretation problem. Even if we found a verified artifact from 100,000 years ago, we might not recognize its significance without context. Imagine trying to understand a smartphone if you'd never seen electricity, plastic, or integrated circuits. You might conclude it was a decorative object or a ritual item, completely missing its actual function and sophistication. This is why most out-of-place artifacts remain controversial. The scientific establishment requires extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims, and single artifacts, no matter how intriguing, rarely meet that standard. Without multiple examples, clear geological context, and supporting evidence, unusual discoveries are more likely to be explained away than accepted as proof of ancient advanced technology. But here's what keeps me fascinated by these artifacts. They remind us that our assumptions about the past might be wrong. Each one forces us to consider possibilities we'd rather ignore. Even if 99% of out-of-place artifacts have conventional explanations, what about the remaining 1%? What about the discoveries that genuinely don't fit our current understanding? And there's another possibility that's even more intriguing. What if we've already found definitive proof of ancient advanced civilizations, but we haven't recognized it yet? What if museum storage rooms around the world contain artifacts that would revolutionize our understanding of the past, but they're labeled as unknown ceremonial objects or unexplained mineral formations because we lack the context to understand their true significance? The search for out-of-place artifacts isn't just about finding proof of ancient civilizations. It's about remaining open to possibilities that challenge our preconceptions about the past, and admitting that our current timeline of human development might be incomplete. Coming up next, we'll explore the most mind-bending possibility of all. What if an ancient, advanced civilization looked nothing like our own, using technologies and materials so different from ours that we wouldn't even recognize them as advanced? Chapter 10. A civilization, unlike anything we know. When we imagine an advanced civilization, our minds automatically conjure images that look suspiciously like our own world. Gleaming skyscrapers of steel and glass, networks of concrete highways, massive industrial complexes pumping smoke into the sky. But this vision is profoundly limited by our own experience. What if an advanced civilization from 100,000 years ago was advanced in ways so different from ours that we wouldn't even recognize their achievements as technology? Let me challenge your assumptions about what advanced actually means. We measure advancement by the permanence and scale of our constructions. The taller the building, the more advanced we consider ourselves. But what if true advancement means the exact opposite? What if a truly advanced civilization understood that permanent structures are actually a sign of primitive thinking? Consider this. Our civilization leaves scars. We strip mountains for metals, clear-cut forests for lumber, and pump carbon into the atmosphere. A more advanced society might have learned to work with natural processes instead of against them, creating technologies that enhanced rather than destroyed their environment. Imagine a civilization whose entire technological base was biological. Instead of mining iron to make steel, they might have engineered bacteria that could excrete metallic fibers stronger than any steel we know. Instead of burning fossil fuels, they could have developed symbiotic organisms that converted sunlight or geothermal energy directly into usable power. Their buildings might have been grown rather than built, living structures created from modified trees or coral-like organisms that could adapt to environmental changes, repair themselves when damaged, and eventually return to the earth when no longer needed. From our perspective, searching for stone foundations and metal artifacts, such structures would be completely invisible. But let's go deeper into this rabbit hole. What if their understanding of physics was so advanced that they didn't need the massive infrastructure we consider essential? We build roads because we don't understand how to move efficiently through three-dimensional space. We build power grids because we haven't mastered wireless energy transmission. We build communication networks because we don't know how to use quantum entanglement for instantaneous information transfer. An advanced civilization might have solved these problems using principles we haven't discovered yet, creating technologies that leave no archaeological footprint because they operate on scales we can't detect with current instruments. Think about their materials science. We're obsessed with creating things that last forever. Plastics that persist for thousands of years, concrete that endures for centuries, metals that resist corrosion. But what if they created materials that were stronger than anything we can imagine, yet designed to completely biodegrade within decades of being abandoned? Such materials would be perfect for their needs, incredibly strong and versatile while in use, but invisible to future archaeologists trying to understand their civilization. The ultimate sustainable technology, advancement without environmental cost. Their transportation systems might be equally invisible to us. Instead of roads and vehicles, they might have mastered biological transportation, modified organisms capable of carrying people across vast distances, or even developed technologies that could manipulate space-time itself, making physical travel unnecessary. And here's a possibility that should blow your mind. What if they integrated their technology directly into their own biology? Instead of carrying tools, they might have engineered enhanced capabilities into their own bodies. Enhanced intelligence, perfect memory, the ability to see across broader spectrums of light, or even to directly interface with their technological systems through thought alone. Such beings wouldn't leave behind the kind of artifacts we search for, tools, weapons, devices, because they wouldn't have needed external tools. Their technology would have been inseparable from their biology, leaving behind only organic remains that would be indistinguishable from those of unmodified humans after thousands of years of decay. But perhaps the most radical possibility is that their entire concept of civilization was different from ours. We measure success by growth, expansion, and dominance over our environment. We build ever larger cities, consume ever more resources, and consider increasing population and technological complexity as signs of progress. What if they chose a different path? What if they achieved a stable, sustainable equilibrium with their environment and maintained it for tens of thousands of years? A civilization that prioritized knowledge over growth, wisdom over power, harmony over dominance. Such a society might have been incredibly advanced in ways we don't even consider advancement. Perfect understanding of ecology, genetics, psychology, and social organization. The ability to maintain complex knowledge systems without writing, to make collective decisions without hierarchical government, to solve problems through cooperation rather than competition. From our perspective, obsessed with visible monuments to human achievement, such a civilization might appear primitive or even invisible. We might find evidence of people living simple lives in harmony with nature and conclude they were unsophisticated hunter-gatherers, never realizing that their simplicity was the product of advanced understanding rather than primitive ignorance. This possibility is both humbling and terrifying. Humbling because it suggests that our own civilization, with all its impressive achievements, might be following a more primitive path than societies that came before us. Terrifying because it implies that advancement and sustainability might be fundamentally incompatible with the kind of permanent, visible monuments we use to measure progress. If such a civilization existed, we would never find definitive proof of their achievements because they were designed to leave no permanent trace. Their legacy wouldn't be in artifacts or ruins, but in knowledge, wisdom, and approaches to living that might still be influencing us in ways we don't recognize.